Hey everyone, welcome back to So I Was Told. I'll be joined again by Crispy soon enough, but before we have another joint podcast episode, I wanted to dive into a topic that me personally I've been hearing about a lot lately, and that is being an empath. So I'll be real with you. I don't exactly know what that means outside of all of the cringy memes that I've seen online poking fun at like people who claim to be an empath and all of that. And to be honest, I myself think it's really cringe. But for some reason, people keep using that word when they talk to me, like about me, like those who've kind of gotten to know me or have had conversations with over an extended period of time. A few of those people, or at least enough people, have made an offhand comment about like being an empath and everything. And I've always kind of just been like, okay. Like, not me, but whatever, I'm not gonna judge you, I guess. So I just figured, why not unpack this? Let's do some research. Let's Google or not Google because Google sucks now, but let's look up what does it even mean to be an empath and why do people keep using that to reference me? So let's get into this. I've always felt things deeply, emotions. They've been something I've carried around like an overstuffed backpack. And the reason why I say that is because I get this image of in my head of like being a little kid and having your JanSport backpack filled with those heavy ass textbooks, coming home at the end of the day and just like feeling that weight come off. Except it never really went away. One of my earliest memories of realizing this heavy weight of emotion had to have been sometime between first and third grade when one of my teachers read the book The Giver to us. And I remember hearing that book and it just hit me like a truck. Like I always resonated deeply with that character. That idea of taking on pain so others don't have to. It made so much sense to me. And it was my favorite book for a long time. In fact, even to this day, I still think about that story and that concept of one person feeling everything for people. Fast forward to adulthood, and that weight hasn't really gotten any lighter. For example, movies wreck me. Like horror movies, I don't do. I don't touch horror movies. I don't like horror movies. Maybe I'll watch like a suspenseful movie, but usually the kind of darkness that is portrayed in horror movies, the evil, the wickedness, it's always felt way too real for me. Way too gross, way too, I don't know, off-putting. But a good romance movie, a heartwarming movie, maybe a drama, a coming of age story. Whoo, I'm there. I'm fully invested and I'm most likely crying. I've legitimately walked out of movies feeling depressed because the emotions they hit me so hard, the high points, the low points, all of those emotions portrayed in cinema. It's beautiful. I love cinematography and how far movies have come in being able to express emotions and tell a story. But they're always so taxing on me. That's why I don't really watch too many movies, even though I want to. So, am I just overly emotional, or is there actually something scientific going on? Because I'd like to know. So, that's what we're exploring today. What even is an empath? What does it actually mean to be an empath? The term gets thrown around a lot, but it's not exactly a clinical diagnosis from what I can find. It's more of a personality trait. An empath is somebody who deeply feels the emotions of others, sometimes to the point where it can be overwhelming. Some people even describe it as absorbing the energy of others around them. Kind of sounds like an energy vampire, which I don't think is something I necessarily want to be. But here's where it gets interesting. Science doesn't exactly back up the idea of absorbing emotions in a mystical sense. Instead, researchers link these traits to something called sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS for short. This was introduced by psychologist Elaine Aron, who coined the term highly sensitive person, or HSP for short. And according to Elaine, about 15 to 20% of people fall into this category. HSPs are people whose brains are literally wired to process emotions and stimuli more deeply. Studies have shown that they have increased activity in areas of the brain associated with empathy, like the mirror neuron system. This means their emotional reactions aren't just imagined, they're real and they're intense. So, if you've ever been told, like I have, you're too sensitive, it's not just a personality quirk. Your brain is actually firing on a different level than most people's. I've heard that term, you're so sensitive, so many times in my life, and I've never really heard it in a positive context. In fact, even just saying that now kind of bums me out. I can remember so many memories growing up where my emotions were dismissed as too much or an overreaction. I remember being disciplined, hearing the phrase, I'll give you a reason to cry. I've done a lot of work over the years, primarily in my early to mid 20s, with people in spiritual formation. And I remember being able to tell so many times before someone ever said anything, this sense of feeling that they were about to communicate to me before we even engaged. It's crazy that psychology actually has a category for these types of experiences. So, growing up, my sensitivity wasn't exactly welcomed. I cried easily. I felt everything too much. I learned to suppress a lot of what I felt, well, especially as a man. But the thing is, that never really worked for me. In fact, it just made me overcompensate. It made life really hard. Still does, really. During my time spent doing spiritual formation work, I was helping others, guiding them, teaching, but I was also constantly burdened by the weight of what they were going through. Not necessarily in a negative sense, like I don't want to do this, more so in the like, I feel for you. I feel what you're feeling, and I so desperately want to feel this with you and go through this with you. I would lament over their pain more than my own at times, actually. In fact, I think it even became a sort of outlet so I wouldn't have to confront my own emotions because I felt everything too deeply and I hated it. Even now in my 30s, I'm still trying to figure out how to balance it. How do I feel without letting those feelings completely take over? How do I embrace my sensitivity instead of seeing it as a flaw? Do you ever feel drained after talking to certain people? If so, I'd love maybe a DM or a comment on your experience with emotions being overwhelming. In the meantime, I'd like to read some submissions that some of you guys have already sent via Instagram. These are all anonymous. This first one says, it's taken me many years of therapy to finally drill the idea of if people have problems with me and don't tell me, it's not my problem. I have imposter syndrome like an MF and always think people are out to get me and exclude me from things. It's exhausting. I wish I could be in the head of a person who doesn't have anxiety / isn't neurodivergent, just to imagine what it's like to be able to make decisions without being debilitated. I cry when pencils with cool colors get broken. I cry when stuffed animals are left behind or tossed and chewed on. I get so easily angered. I've always been a sensitive person. I don't know if this is the same person. I think it is, but I've always been a sensitive person. I try to put up a tough persona, but deep down, I'm very sensitive. I get overwhelmed very easily, and I feel things too much. I feel other people's emotions deeply as if they were my own. I've always seen it as a personal moral failure of mine. Assuming this is all one person, super relatable. I'm still trying to drill that in my own head. Imposter syndrome is something that I struggle with all of the time, especially if I'm in a group of people that I don't know. Oh my gosh, I it's so hard. So I definitely get that. Definitely get the feeling of thinking that people are out to get you or exclude you from things, and it is definitely exhausting. And this last message about being a sensitive person, getting overwhelmed easily. Yes. Feel things too much. Absolutely. Feel other people's emotions as if they were my own. Absolutely. It's kind of funny because there will be situations where I did nothing wrong, but I'll like absorb someone's shame or negative feelings in that sense as if I was the one who did something bad. However, I've never really seen it as a personal moral failure of mine, so that's a little bit interesting. I wonder how that plays out. This next message says, I feel emotions very deeply because of my ADHD. Okay. So I have a form of ADHD. Um, I haven't done any exhaustive tests to figure out what kind or whatever, but I do take medication for my ADHD. So it is interesting that this person is saying they feel emotions very deeply because of ADHD to the point of it being dysregulated. It's way better than being numb, though. Hmm. I've never considered that for myself, the possibility that my sensitivity could be tied to ADHD. So that is very interesting. Next message says, the enormity of my care and shame and desire and anguish and hurt weighs so heavily on me. Ah, I literally just talked about this in this episode. So it's kind of encouraging, not that I'm happy this person is feeling this way, but it's kind of encouraging to see somebody else kind of basically speak your own words before this episode even releases. Quote, I have always been told that the size of my feelings is disproportionate to their roots in reality. Dang, unquote. Oh man, that one hit deep. Let's keep reading here. And that knowledge alone has never been enough for me to shrink them. Oh my gosh, that tied to knowledge and the ability to shrink your emotions is so relevant. I've said this my whole life. Like, I know the answer. I know what reality is. I know, that A plus B equals C. But in this moment, I don't feel it. I can't feel it. And that's what's terrifying. Like when you can't feel what reality is like. Last message here. Thank you guys again so much for submitting these. Last message. My emotions have been an overload on me due to personal issues resurfacing. My emotions have been an overload on me due to personal issues resurfacing. Okay. Such as what I want to do in this life. Valid, a little existential. I do have a vague idea, but at the same time, I still feel like I'm wandering in circles. All I truly want in this life is to feel fulfilled while traveling and working remote. Okay. So maybe a bit circumstantial still doesn't, negate the fact that the emotions that you're feeling in this moment are super heavy. Again, encouraging to know that I'm not the only one out there who feels like they're sitting with this intense weight of heaviness when it comes to emotions and feelings. It's always interesting when I come across people who have similar experiences. So, what do you do if you resonate with all of this? If you, like me, feel everything, here's some things I've learned in just a quick study of all of this. 1. Accept that it's real. You're not being dramatic. You're not broken. High sensitivity is a legitimate trait and it has its strengths. 2. Set emotional boundaries. Not every feeling is yours to carry. Learning how to separate your emotions from those around you is crucial. 3. Take the extra time to be mindful and to practice self-care. Whether it's journaling, meditation, or even just stepping away from overstimulating environments, find ways to regulate your emotions. I'm actually spending a lot of time on that one as of late. What? Creative outlets. Sensitivity can be a gift when channeled into writing. It doesn't have to be writing, it could also be music or art. Use that intensity to create something meaningful. This is actually how I run my page on Instagram. 90% of everything I post is what I'm feeling in the moment, what I'm feeling that day, or what I have been feeling over the past couple of days. It's like I need to get this out there. I need to physically or visually create some sort of manifestation of what I'm feeling so that I can know it's real and so that I know I don't have to be necessarily subjected to such intensity. 5. Lastly, surround yourself with the right people. Find people who understand and support your emotional depth instead of dismissing it. I still struggle with this. Whether it's struggling to open up to people who have come into my life recently, who have said that they see me and it's okay to express such emotions, or just the general fear I have whenever I get close to anybody. I never felt like my emotions were taken seriously, especially from my experiences in the past with old friend groups. I feel like oftentimes they would be dismissive because they didn't know how to handle emotions or didn't know how to integrate real, meaningful conversations with lighthearted banter or just plain old fun. I feel like most people struggle with knowing that friendships should be an invitation to more than just surface level interests. Friendships should be the gateway to community. We should enter into platonic relationships with this groundwork of, I want to get to know you, I love spending time with you, and I want to be there for you, not just for the fun times, but also for the times that you're struggling. Because you, much like me, are a complex person with a ton of emotions. You don't need to be in a romantic relationship to experience those things with others. You don't need to assume just because someone is comfortable opening up around you or talking about serious things that, well, I guess the next step from here is a relationship, a romantic relationship or whatever. It should really just be like a foundation of community. So am I an empath? I don't know. I don't know if I could fully claim that title, but I do know that I'm somebody who feels deeply. Maybe you are too. And if that's the case, I hope this episode helped you make sense of it all. The world doesn't always know what to do with sensitive people. That's okay, for now at least. It doesn't mean that we don't belong here. In fact, maybe the world needs people like us. People who care deeply, who connect, who see things others don't. Maybe we can be leaders who help aid in the revival of empathy. I'd love to hear from you. Do you consider yourself an empath? Have you struggled with feeling too much? I'd love to keep this conversation going. I'd love for it if you left a review and shared your thoughts about this episode in the comments, or just DM me on Instagram and tell me your experiences. I'm always down to have more deep conversations on mental health and emotions. As always, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, take care of yourselves.